Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm excited to be opening the 2023 EPALE Community Conference. And this year's conference is particularly relevant because we are right in the middle of the European Year of Skills. This community conference celebrates the ongoing change, growth, and evolution that happens between lifelong learning and skills acquisition. And that's the reason that we've chosen Bloom as our title and as our theme. And if you look around the room, you'll see later around me, you'll see flowers, because we want to see how skills allow people to flourish and bloom in their lives. And we're encouraging you to send us your pictures of flowers and change. We're inspiring you to use that theme. So over the next 3 days, we're going to be highlighting the potential of adult learning and education to empower people to successfully navigate the labor market changes that are coming, but also to engage citizens in society and democracy. And we'll be touching on those issues in the next few days, and how to include everybody in learning. Welcome to those of you who are here in the We know there are many more who are watching us online. So welcome to those of us who are watching via the EPALE platform, but also on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Welcome to you, one and all. So today's focus is artificial intelligence and the future of skills. And I don't know if that fills you with excitement or fear, but we will address that today, what we can do to understand the implications of artificial intelligence on skills. We know that it's already having a huge impact, and its impact will only get bigger. So let's get ready for it. Just to let you know, the EPALE platform already groups together 135,000 people from Europe and beyond. So we're really excited to have so many people actively engaged in conversations about skills. For those of you who are watching us on the EPALE platform, you need to be logged in order to comment and submit your questions, because we'll be taking your questions to our keynote speakers and our panel. So make sure on EPALE that you're logged in. And to give you the 2 hashtags we're using Bloom with EPALE and European Year of Skills. So those are the 2 hashtags, and we want your selfies, your drawings, your notes, your ideas, your comments, and your questions, your buzzwords, the mood that you have when you're listening to what our speakers say. Everything is useful to share so we grow our community. This, like every EPALE Community Conference, is a mixture of plenary sessions, workshops, and national organizations. We have 3 workshops linked to this week. 2 of them are already full and sold out, but you still have the opportunity to participate in the workshop that's happening immediately after this session finishes. And that's a workshop on boosting green and digital skills for adults. And that runs from 11:45 until 1. We have one tomorrow from 11:45 till 1, which is full, but that's skills for citizenship, democratic education, and for a democratic society. And on the 12th, so that's on Thursday, we've got a workshop on empowering vulnerable groups through non-formal education, and that's already full. So we know that many of you have chosen to take this time to collaborate with us. We also have 11 national side events happening, which are happening in local languages, in different venues, and that allows communities to come together and join. So welcome and thank you to the national support services from Belgium. The German-speaking, the French-speaking, and the Dutch-speaking are all having national events. The national support services of Croatia, Germany, Finland, Hungary, Italy, Ireland, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, and Poland. Thank you all for participating in this community conference by organizing your own local language activities. It's a way of bringing everyone together to make sure that we can share in this group learning. So you'll find out much more if you go to the conference website, and you'll find the information on the banner of the homepage. So that's just some of the information that I wanted to share with you, and I'll be bringing more information to you as the day goes on. But we hope you can play a really active role in our conversations today. So that's enough from me. Let me now introduce our first speaker, and that is Sophia Eriksson-Waterschut, who's the Director for Youth, Education and Erasmus at the European Commission, DG Education and Culture. Sophia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tamsian. Dear friends, dear EPALE friends, it's absolutely a great pleasure to be here and open the 6th EPALE Community Conference. And it's actually a pleasure to know that there are so many adult educators, adult trainers, and many other colleagues here in the room and following us online. So big welcome from my side, from the European Commission's DG Education and Culture, to all of you in the room, and also big welcome to those who are listening to this conference online. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the 3 Belgian EPALE National Support Services for actually hosting this event. And what a great moment to being co-creating together, perhaps the next steps of where we're going with adult learning and perhaps also with the EPALE community. I'm really looking forward to be here now and to hear also the outcomes later on. Now, this year we are celebrating an important year. It is the European Year of Skills, and the theme of this conference is, of course, a very positive and encouraging one, that we want skills to bloom for the future. And skills are clearly blooming, and they are fully embedded in our education and training systems, but also in our informal learning. And we do need our schools, we need our universities, we need our vocational education and training institutions, we need our adult education and adult learning institutions on board to make this happen, to make skills bloom. But to make it work, we also need collaboration, because the actors together will make sure that we actually can grow and that skills can develop. If skills are supposed to grow and develop, if skills are supposed to bloom, well, we need well-trained staff. This is no news for you, but it's good to say the obvious sometimes. And I'm looking at the trends across Europe. It is quite worrying, because we see that there are unfortunately critical shortages of teachers, educators, and trainers. And this is a trend, unfortunately, indeed, across our continent. But the problem is, if we don't address this critical shortage, actually we cannot be seriously thinking that skills can develop and skills cannot bloom. So we really have to look into this more. Now, I will mention one flagship that we think can help. There are, of course, many measures to increase the problem that we are facing. But I want to say a few words about our flagship program, the Erasmus Plus program. And I think the Erasmus Plus program can actually help a bit in this challenge. Because the Erasmus Plus program, it supports the personal and the professional development of learners, staff, and institutions in adult learning. And it does that also by making sure that actors work together and that they develop innovative practices. And of course, being a transnational program, it takes this transnational cooperation to a new level. And this may be factors that enhances both the openness and quality of our adult learning systems. And I think it can also be an attractiveness factor for the professions. Now, it goes without saying that the Erasmus Plus program is supporting fully the European Year of Skills through different activities, actions that are dealing with skills development, upskilling, reskilling. And I should say this cuts through all the education and training systems. But I want to make a point as well that Erasmus Plus has a very strong emphasis on inclusion to help people with fewer opportunities so they can also develop and acquire skills. And for that, outreach, I think we have seen from a lot of evidence, outreach is key. So I'm really pleased to see that this conference will spend quite a lot of time on this important theme. Now, let me turn to, well, Erasmus Plus, yes, but when we are looking and thinking a bit of the future, I cannot not mention the fact that we are in a bit of a review mode. So what does it mean? Well, timely or regularly, we have to evaluate and assess, are we investing our funds into the right things? So this is what is happening now. Erasmus Plus is undergoing a so-called midterm evaluation to be able to also set the right priorities for the future. And for this purpose, we have recently launched a public consultation where we want to collect Maybe it works. Sorry about that. So the public consultation is a tool here to collect the views of citizens and organizations on how we can improve Erasmus+. So it doesn't matter if you have experience of the program or not experience of a program, if you are a learner or an educator, we really need to hear your views. So please take part in this. For example, we would like to know your thoughts on key questions, such as if the program's objective, are they the right ones for today's and for the future's needs? How well is Erasmus+ doing to reflect the green transition and build the skills for the future? Is the program inclusive enough, and is it easy enough to access? So these are examples of questions that we are really keen to hear from you. And indeed, it will be bringing us evidence that we can use when we design and prepare the next generational program, which will start from 28 to 2034. And the consultation is running until 8th of December, so you have some time to take part in this. Now, another important theme at this conference is learning about democracy and elections in the digital age. Now, the timing could not be better for this conference and for the theme, because next spring, Europeans will go to the polls and they will vote in our unique and remarkable democracy, as Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated in her recent State of the Union address. It's good to note that last time when we voted, 2019, we had about 50% of EU citizens that took part. And let's hope that this number can be even better next time. And perhaps this EPALE community can help to boost this figure. It's our encouragement, our invitation, our hope. Because we know how important adult learning is not only for skills here, but also for developing citizenship competencies. So the ability to act as responsible citizens, to fully participate in civic and social life, it is a fantastic right that we have in democracies. And we need to promote this further among all age groups. Now, of course, there are many people these days that are worried about disinformation. And it's not always straightforward to recognize what is true and what is fake. And the role of artificial intelligence in this may also create some worries. From the side of the European Commission, we have tried to contribute to this concern. And as part of the Digital Education Action Plan, we have published so-called guidelines on tackling disinformation and promoting digital literacy through education and training. And these guidelines aim to foster a better awareness and knowledge regarding disinformation. Again, Erasmus+ finance many projects on this theme, on digital literacy and resilience against disinformation. And I'm happy to read that in the adult learning sector, there's a lot of projects dealing with curriculum, with online courses for educators, or projects that target senior citizens in rural areas, to give you two examples. And all these are thanks to great adult learners as gathered at this conference. Now turning to EPALE, which is a small but likewise, I would say, an important piece of helping skills to bloom. It's a great free community, free membership community, and it enables members to connect with and learn from each other. And what is an interesting, a positive fact is that 60% of the content is provided by the members themselves. Now, EPALE community has significantly grown over the past years, and there are now more than 135,000 registered members. That's a good number, great number. And more than 100,000 practitioners in the field of adult learning, they visit the platform every month to find information, to find resources, and inspiration from each other. So these figures, I would say, underline the added value of EPALE for its users. Now, we at the Commission, we try to continuously enhance this positive experience and the user experience. And I'm really happy that we have something to announce today, because we are introducing, as I'm speaking, we are introducing today a new section on the platform called My Community. And this feature promotes the most popular articles, and it also includes some suggestions for further reading. It is also a way to reward those who are very active on the platform. So it shines a spotlight on those active members, and you can earn a so-called digital EPALE badge if you're very active. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Now, dear EPALE friends, before I finish, I want to also make you aware of that we will have the next Erasmus Plus call to be published in November. And I'm counting here again on your large participation. Do take part of these ample opportunities that there are. And then let me then just wish you a fruitful and vibrant event, and I'm really much looking forward to hear about the outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for sharing that and particularly highlighting the opportunities that exist on the EPALE platform and what we could achieve when we come together. So now I'm going to pass the floor to our next speaker, who's also from the European Commission. I'd like to welcome Manuela Geleng, the Director for Skills and Jobs at the European Commission, DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. Manuela.
Yes, now it works. Dear EPALE community, it's really a pleasure for me to be here with you today, because with the ongoing year of skills, it's now a special moment where skills are in the spotlight. And I would like to say that they will be so for a very long time, because actually skills define who we are, who we want to be, and what we want to do. So skills are an intrinsic part of us, and you, in EPALE, you are clearly very close to the European Year of Skills. Let me say that after 5 months of its launch, the year has already achieved much. It has placed skills at the top of the EU agenda, showcasing inspiring initiatives from all corners of Europe. A number of flagship meetings, conference initiatives have already taken place. But let me say, this is only the tip of the iceberg, because we know that you, as EPALE members, as key stakeholders, are carrying the torch for the European Year of Skills, so that the year is not just a year that takes place at European level, but a year that takes place on the ground. So far, over 1,100 events have already been planned in 39 countries, so well beyond the EU. 800 of those have already taken place, and I encourage you to upload your events on the interactive map on the European Year's website. The website actually hosts dozens of stories about inspiring projects and programs that are powering growth and change on the ground. You can use it as a source of information, and you can also submit your own skills stories for publication. I think it's a unique opportunity for you to showcase your important work. An important goal of the year is as I already said, the outreach beyond Brussels. The activities that are organized at national, local, and regional level. Let me say that in your countries, you can discuss, plan with your national coordinators that have been appointed in 35 countries. And I invite you to reach out to them, to coordinate with them your activities. Also, the representation of the European Commission are actively promoting the European Year of Skills. At European level, we have already had 180 initiatives. Some of them you may have heard of. In spring, we had the Green Deal Industrial Plan, which is the blueprint to make the EU industrial strategy sustainable, ensuring growth and competitiveness while achieving the net zero society. Another major initiative that is currently negotiated at European level is the Net Zero Industry Act, which will support the European industry to manufacture net zero technologies. One crucial feature of this act will be the creation of net zero academies to equip the workforce with the skills related with these technologies. Moving from green to digital, the Cyber Skills Academy was launched in April to be the single point of entry for cybersecurity training offers, certification, funding opportunities, and promoting cybersecurity skills. Later, we are also planning to launch a reinforced quality framework for traineeships, which aims at reviewing, first of all, the current framework and reinforce the principles, addressing issues such as fair remuneration and access to social protection for those that are undertaking a traineeship. In hand with supporting up and reskilling of people already in the EU, we know that we also need to attract talent in several key shortage occupations. Currently in the EU, we have 38 shortage of occupation between ranging from hospitality, waste management, construction, so a mix of digital and skills and other skills that are necessary. Therefore, in November, the Commission will present a package on talent mobility, including a proposal for an EU talent pool to which third country nationals will be able to apply and be matched with jobs in the European countries. And as AI plays an important role in this conference, let me say that in November, the Commission will organize a social forum under the title of how artificial intelligence is impacting the world of work, and where obviously skills play an important role. While obviously I'm speaking about the year, we are almost half through the year. We have another half of year coming up until May next year. I think we can already say now that after this year we will need another year, and then we'll need a decade, and then we'll need a lifetime, because skills is something that goes with us all the time. But the year is not about just speaking and talking and organizing events. The year is actually much more. It's about, on one side, achieving this mindset of upskilling and reskilling throughout your lifetime, but it's also about implementation. I would say the year of skills is really about implementation, implementation, implementation. And what? I think we have a number of initiatives that need to be implemented on the ground. We have the individual learning accounts that are now being rolled out or implemented in over half of the member states, also with funding from the European Social Fund and the Recovery and Resilience Facility. We have the Pact for Skills, who brings together stakeholders from all corners, social partners, company, training providers, NGOs, educators and teachers and trainers from all countries. We have over 1,000 members which have committed to 6 million training opportunities. 2 million of those have already been implemented. And I could go continue with the Centers of Vocational Excellence, which are funded under Erasmus+, and which are really shaping and steering vocational education and training into a more modern era where digital and green are really a fundamental part. And this is really important because most of the jobs that will be created by the green and digital transition will be vocational education and training jobs. So this is about putting the centrality of the skills in focus that are supported through vocational education and training. I could go on for a very long time with what needs to be implemented, but I guess you know best. And I think in these 3 days, you will be discussing very important topics. But for me, I would like to focus on the first one, which is about empowering and the workforce with the right skills. Because indeed, empowering people to access quality jobs and to fully participate in the economy and be active in the society, or in the words of our President, Ursula von der Leyen, to match people's aspirations is a key objective. So I wish you every success for your work under EPALE, and I look forward to discussing with you throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Manuela. It's really exciting to hear what's happening and the new developments and how this can be seen. Now, I'm really excited to introduce the next 3 people because we are hosted here in Brussels in Belgium, and we have representatives of the 3 Belgian communities here who are going to give us a brief welcome. So welcome to Marco Cecchinato, to Karine Nicolai and Madi Bollen on behalf of Belgium. The microphone is yours.
Goedemorgen allemaal, voor de Nederlandstaligen, hier in de zaal en natuurlijk ook online. Also from the Flemish EPALE team, I wish you a very nice EPALE conference. Live streamed here from Brussels. I wish you an inspirational day.
Und auch viele Grüße aus Ostbelgien. We are very happy to welcome you here on site in Brussels and online for the people at home. And we really hope that you will feel empowered after this day.
Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à Bruxelles au nom de EPALE Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles. More precisely, we are in Molenbeek, in a neighborhood full of life, where we put down our suitcases in an exciting venue, the creative hub LaVallée. Let's take a look at this unique place watching this short video.
LaVallée, c'est autant des bureaux que des ateliers ou des salles d'exposition. Un lieu pour soutenir et favoriser l'émulation des idées, l'intelligence collective et les opportunités de collaboration. On y croise des artistes, des collectifs, des créateurs au statut précaire et des entrepreneurs chevronnés. Plasticiens, vidéastes, graphistes, peintres, stylistes, sculpteurs, décorateurs et métiers de la communication. Ensemble, nous développons au quotidien des projets et professionnalisons nos activités dans des espaces de travail divers.
Thank you very much So as you've just seen, we are in this really unique venue, and that was by choice. We wanted to come and spend time here where there is many entrepreneurs, creatives, and others coming together to rethink their own future and how they can reskill. So we're about to move into our keynote speaker, but before I do that, let me just remind you of the hashtags that we would like you to use, because you make the conference. I'm really delighted to have some faces to talk to, because for the last few years, the conference has been entirely online, but I know there's a huge community of you engaging and watching, and we want your messages, your comments, your questions, your pictures, anything that's been inspired by the themes that we're talking about today. And remember that it's the European Year of Skills, and that's one of our hashtags, so please communicate with us actively. So I promised that this morning the theme would be artificial intelligence. Now that's a topic about which a lot has been written. Not many people understand a lot, but there's a certain amount of fear about what it will do. If you read some articles, they say that it will lead to the extinction of human life very soon. There are others that say it could lead us to a future full of leisure and entertainment, where we get rid of the difficult, the dirty, and the unpleasant jobs, and we somehow pass them on to robots. So somewhere between those two extremes is a potential future, but the future is not written yet. We can create something different, and our keynote speaker is going to help us navigate all of those different issues. So I'd like to invite to join me here on the stage Clare Stark, who is the UN coordinator at UNESCO for emerging technologies. Clare, please come and join me. Thank you. Now, just to give everyone a background so they understand your level of expertise, you've got more than 20 years of experience on working in international relations and strategic planning, but more specifically, you are a UN coordination officer in the priority Africa and external relations sector at UNESCO. You're responsible for enhancing UN-wide coordination on emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and neurotechnology. You also develop strategic partnerships with the private and public sector. You're in a unique position because you co-chair the high-level committee on programs interagency group on AI, and that brings together 40 UN agencies all together to discuss these huge technologies, and particularly to strengthen the ethical development and the deployment of AI to support the achievement of the 2030 SDGs, so AI for good, if I can rephrase that briefly. So we're here to talk about AI in the context of jobs, employment, skills. And AI, of course, holds a lot of promise and risks. And it's creating this huge debate in society. And in the adult education and learning sector, we're also talking about it, as is everyone else. So we know that it's affecting the labor market. Whole professions may disappear. Others will emerge. But we need to understand that, are we ready for this fourth industrial revolution? Because it's such a transformation in education. And that's some of the issues that we're going to talk about. Also, the questions of AI, they challenge our assumptions on what do we mean by learning, because AI is a large learning module. It also questions what we mean by intelligence. So these are elements that we might pick up on. But first of all, let me start by just inviting you to give us a sort of context. What is the role of AI in the fourth industrial revolution, the huge transformation that we see on our labor markets? What are the risks and the potentials that we should be looking for?
Well, thank you so much. And I think, as you mentioned, AI has huge benefits for humanity. We've seen AI's use in personalized learning, which can help students that have difficulties, including students with disabilities, because we can see with AI that we can translate text to audio, making it much easier for students to learn. We can do assessments with artificial intelligence. We've seen the pervasiveness of AI in personalized medicine, so making although we have seen some difficulties with this as well. I'll just give a few examples. If we're talking about gender equality, we see that personalized medicine, the algorithms were using men to actually define the types of treatment. So now as we increase and pay more attention to the data that's going into the algorithms, we are able to make it more personalized, individualized for people's specific characteristics. So making medicine more effective. And I think we can also see the importance of AI in terms of research and development. You may all be familiar with the advancements in defining the proteins and in developing new proteins that don't even exist in nature, or in terms of physics, as we've seen with controlling nuclear fusion, which will have huge implications. One of the speakers was talking about the importance of our environment, of climate change. If we're able to control fusion, we may be able to have an important renewable energy resource that could help us deal with the climate change issue. So I think there can be no question about the importance of artificial intelligence and emerging technologies in our lives. But we've also seen some of the issues that have come to light with artificial intelligence, particularly in terms of the data that's being used. We've noticed that there has been a number of cases with bias and discrimination. You may have heard about the MIT scholar that was using facial recognition technology. When she put on, it didn't recognize her black face, it only recognized the white face when she wore a mask. So this became huge news, and there's a lot of work going into developing algorithms that are ethical and don't perpetuate gender and racial discrimination. I think a number of you have also seen with the rise of generative AI, large language models, including the biggest one, of course, is ChatGPT, that this has had a pervasive effect on society and through all sectors of society. And everybody is trying to decide how to use generative AI. And this is quite important, I think, the question of generative AI, because we've also seen the issues around hallucinations. So hallucinations is, of course, about when generative AI will give you false information. And it gives it to you in a way that sounds very believable. So this also brings with it issues around trust. Can we trust generative AI? And you may have seen that recently they've also put a disclaimer on ChatGPT, which is ChatGPT 4.0. And soon we will be going beyond with Mustafa and others who are now saying that soon we'll all have personalized AI. So for each and every one of you, it will be personalized to you individually. So as we can see, this technology is happening very quickly. And I think governments are having a difficult time in catching up. We have seen that the EU, of course, with the EU Regulations Act, has been really at the forefront, and I think has really been showing the example for a lot of countries around the world, as they did with the data protection regulations. But these are some of the issues that we're seeing, the pervasiveness, and really trying to grapple with how do we use these technologies in an ethical way, and how can they rather help support our jobs as tools for our jobs rather than supplant humanity.
Thank you. I mean, you've set out in many different ways that AI could potentially transform our understanding and medicine. That's clearly quality of life. So you're talking about highly skilled jobs being able to be done better. But if I think about health, we're an aging population. We actually have an enormous shortage of people who are in the social care sector, the personal assistants, the people who help you bathe and get dressed for the elderly people. So yes, we may well have, new developments in our cures for cancer because AI helps us crunch that. But how do you see AI affecting a broader range, perhaps towards the lower skilled end of our jobs environment, where there's quite a lot of concern?
I think it will affect a number of jobs. I think it'll affect from truckers, as we're seeing with automated cars, although there have been a number of issues with automated cars. This is still being rolled out about who will be liable, who will be responsible. So I think this issue, just to come back to the issue of accountability and responsibility, is kind of some of the key issues we're really looking at UNESCO. So, we developed this Ethics of AI recommendation in November 2021, and it was adopted by 193 countries. And it was, in fact, one of the reasons, artificial intelligence and the future of education, why the United States decided to recently rejoin the organization after a long absence. So in this recommendation, which was developed by a number of interdisciplinary experts, so we had ethicists, we had philosophers, we had technologists helping us to develop this recommendation, which is really one of the first global standards on artificial intelligence. And there is actually, it covers a number of principles. So it looks at issues around data privacy, it looks at issues around addressing bias and discrimination, it looks at issues around transparency and accountability. And I come back to this because I think it's really important when we're looking at how we use AI tools to assess people in the workforce, because there has been a number of issues with this in particular. In the United States, there was a case where AI was being used to assess teachers. And when they asked for information about how the decision was made, they weren't able to get that information. So we know that there's still this kind of black box phenomena associated with artificial intelligence. There's an ongoing movement to ask for more information to be available, so on open platforms. And UNESCO very much supports this idea of open platforms. But we see, for example, with generative AI, there's a huge lack of transparency in how the decisions are being made. So if you're using this to assess somebody and you don't know how the decision is being made and it's not transparent, this can have huge impacts on people's work life. So that's kind of one example I just wanted to give. And maybe just to say, I know we're kind of going off the scenario a bit because we were talking a little bit about the governance issue, but that we're really working now with countries. We're rolling out the recommendation in 50 countries right now, and we've developed 2 tools. So we have a readiness assessment methodology, which is a diagnostic tool to look at where countries are in terms of AI. Do they have the necessary infrastructure in place? Do they have any kind of AI strategy or policy? We found, for example, that only about 67 countries around the world have any kind of AI legislation. So I think this is really important because you need to have this governance structure in place because it affects all sectors. It affects the economy, it affects jobs, it affects the type of AI curricula and the skills that you're building into your education systems. So this is some of the ongoing work that we're doing right now. And in addition, we also have an ethical impact assessment, which looks mostly at AI procurement. So asking those sorts of ethical questions about the sort of AI that you're using. Who are you using it with? Are you consulting? We talked about the importance of public consultation. Are you consulting with the end users? Do the end users know how their data is being used, how it's being protected? So these types of questions. And then if there is some kind of issue, what is the recourse? Where do people go if something happens?
Okay. Thank you. We're starting to get a couple of comments in on social media, and people are interested in finding out more about, how AI is going to affect the world of work. Now you mentioned AI is being used for performance assessment, for example, teachers and others. Teaching and learning is an area where there is traditionally a very strong culture of sharing. You develop an interesting activity, you share the results with other people so they can take it and adapt it with their own community, with their own classrooms and their own spaces. So is there a risk that if people are sharing their learning materials, all of that is fed into AI that then develops its own curriculum that's then cheaper for public authorities to then take and use? And where does this leave the creativity and this shared learning that's so important for educators?
Well, I think there's a number of different ways that AI can be used in the education sector. I mean, we've seen with Goldman Sachs, just coming back to how it will affect jobs, the Goldman Sachs report says that 300 million jobs will be affected by artificial intelligence. And I think there's some discussion about how those jobs will be affected. So this kind of comes back to the issue of training. So if we're looking at, AI should really be seen as a tool, but to be able to use it effectively, people need to understand how the tool works. So there's a lot of upskilling and reskilling programs that are already underway to look at some of these issues. Because we all don't need to have, while we need to have an understanding of, AI and machine learning, what it means, we don't all need to be technologists. And I think even when we talk about, for example, the job of coding, some people say, well, we may not need coders in the future, because if we have AI that can already develop code on its own and through machine learning, ameliorate that code and make it better and better, then do we actually need coders? But on the other hand, we can also think about one of the deficiencies, I think, with AI is also that it's not able to kind of have this creative problem-solving ability, because it synthesizes existing data, right? So I think it can really be used in our careers and in our work if we're able to use it in an effective way. So in terms of education, we actually had a recent meeting with education ministers to talk about how, in particular, generative AI was being used in schools. And we did a survey, and we found out that out of 450 schools, less than 10% had developed any kind of AI policy. So it's been a bit kind of ad hoc, and I think a lot of educational institutions understand that this technology is not going away, that we need to adapt and evolve our systems, but identifying the best way to do that. I mean, ChatGPT has been used to write exams, so then other systems have been developed. I think it's called Zero GPT, to identify whether the paper you have written has been developed by ChatGPT, or was it issues, and how do we watermark? This is one of the ways to identify how we are using images or text created by ChatGPT. So this is important also for, somebody mentioned the upcoming elections, watermarking images, particularly to identify AI-generated content, is really important. But getting back to this question of using AI in curricula, I mean, in Singapore, for example, they've developed some really interesting models, which is also open source, on how they're using AI curricula in schools. But I think it's important that, teachers must be part of the process. First, they need to be trained on how to use AI. This includes prompt engineering, but also they need to help develop the curricula. Because as we know with generative AI, we need to assess the information that's being used. And this is particularly important for young users. So in the guidance that UNESCO recently developed on guidance for AI in education, we've also said that children under 13 should not be using generative AI without supervision.
Thank you. We're starting to get some more questions, and thank you for those who are sharing your suggestions and comments. And somebody's saying, so this vision sees AI as complementary rather than replacing humans as part of this. And I have a great example. My son sees a speech therapist, and the speech therapist develops the program for him. But one of the things she has to do is create a list of 20 words that have the sound ooh in it, so he can practice that. Now that's boring work. And so she uses ChatGPT to generate 20 words with that particular sound. And so it's supporting that personalized individual support rather than replacing her. So is that what you're talking about, that AI could complement and allow more individualized, tailored programs supporting the leadership of the trainer?
Exactly. So it should be seen as helping us to develop more of our higher learning and taking away sort of those automated tasks. So helping us to maybe focus our time maybe on doing something more creative. In this case, helping your son with speech pathology. So I think it really has some incredible uses that can be really helpful in the educational context as well.
Let me now focus in on the adult learning space, because there is obviously the importance of the value of education, getting a qualification or a skill, but part of the huge benefit of adult education is its importance of building a sense of belonging, of participation, of bringing people back into society, of pathways to citizenship, understanding more about the way society around you works. Now, how do we keep all of that magic element that happens in adult learning if there's a risk that we reduce everything to, AI says, these are the things you have to learn, these are the exercise to do it, just go away and do it?
I think this is one of the issues that we're also grappling with, because as we've seen with different AI applications, generative AI included, a lot of this data is coming also from the global north. And so we're seeing, for example, in terms of diversity, so diversity of knowledge and diversity of language. Now there's a lot of work being done to have more languages available. But I think there's a huge, if we look outside of the developing world, there's a huge data gap. We know that billions of people still, 1.3 billion people, I believe, still don't have access to the internet. So that means that we don't have a lot of data. And this is very much data coming from the global north. So it's very much an approach to the world. It's not a diversity of approaches, which is also very much important to UNESCO, because we very much support a diverse approach, an approach that supports different cultures and different ways of thinking and different ways of being. So I think that's also something to take into consideration when we're thinking about generative AI. And I very much agree with you that there is kind of this risk that we may sort of be siloed in to kind of thinking about one trajectory.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting to pick up on, because I know that for some time there's been this tension within the adult learning community between the public objective of getting people into the labor market, increasing their employability, and the adult learning community that sees it as a much bigger part of belonging and connection, and not wanting to reduce people down to economic units. And I think the message that you gave, that it's important about diversity and making sure that the the elements that go into the black box contain the reality, the cultures, the experiences of many more people than we have at the moment. I think that's really helpful to hear that that's happening. And as you rightly said, we have an enormous proportion of the global population, 50% of the African population has no access to energy and electricity, let alone the internet. So there's a significant number of people who are invisible to this new technology. Their experiences, their voices, their learning needs are just not visible. On the other hand, if we can get this right, what AI could do at scale is potentially start to deliver personalized, tailored learning programs and experiences when we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough educators, we don't have enough capacities. So do you see a path forward that if we get this right, that if we can get that plurality and diversity of experiences in to the black box, that what comes out could be hugely beneficial for developing access to skills and learning to many more people?
Well, I think there's definitely benefits. I mean, as we've seen, just for example, with the rise of online education, this has given huge opportunities to people to gain access to education, but also to upskill, to get new qualifications. And I think this will only be increased with the ability to access AI and everything that it has to offer. I do think, however, that there is a huge digital divide as we're seeing in the world today. And I think that this digital divide risks increasing inequalities if we don't affect it, if we don't address it very quickly. So I think that's one of the issues that we're really working on, is trying to address the digital divide so that everybody can have equal access. Because I think in the end, we're also about trying to give this access to everyone in the world. It shouldn't just be a happy few. I think just as we're kind of seeing in the world today, the technology is being developed by kind of a happy few. So in order to increase the diversity and the reach, we need to reduce this monopoly. And this means helping startups and other small and medium-sized businesses around the world to get off their feet and to be able to become part of the global AI landscape, including in a number of developing countries. And just to say, where we're working on implementing our Ethics of AI recommendation, the 50 countries, all of them are in the small or medium-sized countries. So this is really trying to help to get people back to be part of this AI revolution, because everybody really needs to be part, I think, of this AI revolution.
Thank you. So, I mean, this revolution is inevitable. It's coming. It's here, and it risks to overwhelm us unless we have some kind of policy in place, until we, set the guardrails around it. And we've had a comment on social media that says the truth is we'll never really be ready enough. And that Jana, who put this in, said, I'm glad that the EU is responding and making proposals for regulation. And you said that there are 60 countries around the world that are starting to do this. You also mentioned that most of these AI tools are developed by the happy few, the lucky few, and I might also add the rich, very rich few. So how much does it matter, the ownership of the AI tools? Because these AI tools were learnt on our data. They were learnt on our experience, and yet the ownership, the control, and the power lies in a very small number. How do we increase that transparency?
I think one of the main issues is data. So I think a lot of people say data is the new gold. But countries, and a number of countries, have developed data privacy policies. But it's important for countries to protect the data of their citizens, because as you know, a lot of AI models scrape data, right? So we first need to be able to protect the data of our citizens. And that is about ownership of data, because data is incredibly important. I mean, as you may have heard, surveillance capitalism, our data is being used, it's being sold. It was, you may have seen about Cambridge Analytics, it helped to influence elections around the world. So this is, now that there's a wide, I think, public understanding about the importance of data, why protecting your data is important, and understanding where your data goes, then we will be able to kind of counteract. And there's a number of laws that are being developed and put in place, which also link, and we need to link the discourse a little bit better between how data is managed and issues around AI, or as we move into, for example, neurotechnology, because we're talking about artificial intelligence now, but as we know, Neuralink and other companies are putting neurotechnology out on the market, which is not being regulated. So if we're able to take your brain data and that's not being protected sufficiently, that could even have more powerful implications.
So just help us to understand a little bit about this coming technology. What do you mean by neurotechnology? Help us to sort of, if we're not specialists in it, we don't really understand what that means. My understanding is at the moment, you have to physically interact with technology and equipment which is external to your organic body, but neurotechnology is the next step. Tell me more about that.
Well, so there are different types of neurotechnology, but it's basically a device in your brain that would be able to, it has many different benefits. So it can activate parts of your brain. For example, if you have Alzheimer's or you have seizures. I saw an incredible video where a man activated his device and the seizures stopped. So I think, you know, as any technology, it can be misused, or it can be, you know, there's the dual purpose, dual use of technology. And I think with neurotechnology, UNESCO has been working quite effectively in this area. We developed with our bioethics team a report on the human rights associated with neurotechnology. So some of the issues around neurotechnology is when you are using this device, they have already been able to translate thought into text, right? So we can infer what people are thinking using neurotechnology. And there have been some experiences done, granted on laboratory mice, in which they were able to implant new memories into the minds of the rats. So Raphael Yuste and other experts at Columbia University have done this. So people say you could extrapolate, and in the future, perhaps what you can do with rats now, you may be able to do with humans in the future. So these are just some of the kind of, as we look to the future, I think this is some of the issues that we're seeing, is that we need really anticipatory governance, because the technology is changing so quickly that we need to be able to be much more adaptive and flexible. This includes in learning, but in our jobs. So the importance, again, of lifelong learning, being able to gain those skills and competencies necessary as these new technologies are coming at a much more rapid pace.
Thank you. This is a really fascinating deep dive into technology developments and what that might mean for our society. I'd like us to just focus, because we had a couple of questions coming in. Next year, 2024, is the year of the European elections. 500 million European citizens, 300 million or so adults eligible to vote. That's a fertile breeding ground for disinformation and other AI-generated ways to influence those elections. Should we be worried? What should we do? And what could this community that works on adult learning, literacy, citizenship, what could they do to help immunize the population against the risk of AI manipulation?
Yeah, this is a huge question. I think if you've seen with, how are they called? QAnon? QAnon, which, was a group in the US and an extremist group in the US. And basically because of the echo chambers that are created through social media and through the algorithms, actually, which keep showing you the content that you want to see. So it makes extremists more extreme. And which has led to violence. You probably saw the storming of Capitol Hill. So there are huge implications. And as we're seeing with the upcoming elections, also in the United States with Biden, there have already been deep fake videos. So again, the issue is coming up very much. I'm more familiar with the US cases, but there's a call for more legislation on some of these issues, particularly because of the influence that we'll have on election processes. Some people are calling for specific internet shutdowns. We are at UNESCO, we had a big conference recently on building trust for internet platforms. So we are developing guidelines on what this would look like, how to build trust on internet platforms. But in terms of what this community can do, I think one of the most important things is really media literacy. It's really looking at being able to critically evaluate the news that we're getting. Because unfortunately, this is going to become more difficult to differentiate between what is real and what is fake. Because with generative AI, we can also, we can use fake voices. We can, put images on people. There's been some huge issues related to, I don't know if you have seen this, but there was a case recently of these Spanish girls, which was really, this points to sexual exploitation. And, it was actually boys in their community, that took their faces and then put them on naked bodies and then, through an AI application, and then made this available to all of their friends. And apparently they were extorting the girls. So this just shows you how these openly available platforms can be used for really malicious purposes. And I think this will only, the risk during election processes is that it can really instigate violence. So it's really important to make sure that people are aware that this is a risk and to have this kind of media literacy to be able to critically analyze the news that they're receiving in terms of the upcoming elections.
Thank you. So that critical thinking, the analysis skills, the ability to ask yourself questions, who's put this out, who's behind it, where's this information coming from, how relevant is it? You mentioned earlier that AI hallucinates, and maybe you can just, because the public perception is that computers can never be wrong, that it's binary, it's 1, 0, it's yes, no, it's black and white. And if you feed computers facts, what will come out will be an analysis of those facts. But what we've seen from AI is something quite different. Tell us a little bit more about this hallucination.
Well, I was just talking to one of the other speakers recently, and we were talking about this case of this Japanese couple that was driving along and they were following the GPS, and they followed the GPS over the bridge into the water because they were blindly following technology. I think that's sort of the analogy. And recently I was also reading an article about people using generative AI to identify mushrooms in the forest, which I think is an interesting case, because if there is a misidentification, because of course, generative AI uses machine learning. So it gathers the data, and then that data is the data that's available on the internet. So if somehow it gathers data that's not appropriate or specific enough, it can have deadly consequences. For example, if you were to ingest a toxic mushroom. So I think these are some of the issues we know that the technology is getting better, but there's still this need for critical analysis. I think it can be helpful in helping, for example, and there's a number of discussions ongoing about, can we co-author papers with AI? I mean, there have been a number of writers co-authoring with AI, but there's also the issue of intellectual property rights. So when an AI creates an artwork or music, and there's a number of cases ongoing right now related to IP rights, are the artists being appropriately recognized or not? Or is their artwork being somehow stolen? So I think these are some of the kind of ongoing issues that we're talking about, which I think are really important to have global discussions about.
Thank you. Just for the last minute that we've got together, because it's been a really great conversation. How optimistic are you? Are you an optimist or a pessimist? When you look at how governments have been a bit behind the curve, but they're now getting to grips with how do we regulate, how do we share this, how do we build transparency and trust? Are you an optimist about what AI can deliver for humanity, or are you a pessimist?
I'm definitely an optimist because I think there's been this rise in global consciousness about the ethical issues around artificial intelligence, and that we want artificial intelligence to be developed for the greater human good. So if we can keep on that pathway, I do think that governments do need to catch up, but governments have a responsibility to their people. So while we need to work with companies, and I think there has been some gaps in governments understanding the technology. So it's important that we have the technologists explaining, but we shouldn't, have those technologists sometimes saying, we know the technology and it's for us to worry about, because governments are ultimately responsible for, their citizens. So they have this ultimate responsibility, I think, in ensuring that AI develops in a way that is for the greater good and ensures sustainable development. So I'm optimistic. I think there's definite benefits, but I think that there are a number of issues that have come to light. I think as we have a plurality of voices, this is really important. That's why having these kinds of discussions and making sure that these discussions reverberate is really important as well, because more people need to be part of the discussion about how we develop AI.
Thank you. Can we say a warm thank you to Claire for sharing her insights and expertise with us?
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, that was really thought-provoking. I hope it gave you as much food for thought as it did to me. My mind is turning around on, what this means, the implications. Excited about what AI might be able to deliver in terms of new knowledge, new medical abilities, but also some trepidation that will our governments get to grips with this in time and recognize that their job is protecting our public interest. So we'll pick up on those issues in a little bit with our panel. But first, I would like to connect to someone. I mentioned that we've got 11 different national workshops being held in local languages across Europe, and we're delighted that we have a connection now. If the technology helps me, we should be connecting in. Hello to the Netherlands.
Hello, this is Amsterdam. Hello, Europe and Brussels and Tamsin. Good morning. Well, so lucky to be here and very interesting this connection. I think you can hear me? Yeah, okay, I see a thumbs up. Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and to you especially, Tamsin. Thank you so much for hosting this conference again this year, and very interesting to hear about all the skills and what AI might offer to us in the future. Right after this short introduction of myself, I will hop on my bike and drive to our meeting in the Netherlands we are organizing regarding life skills. We're going to have a mini conference in the afternoon in the public library in Amsterdam to discuss with each other how we can address life skills and how we already are addressing life skills and what can we do more concerning formal and non-formal education in the Netherlands. So if you don't mind, Tamsin, I will hop on my bike and go to our conference in the library. So it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Jumalis, and I hope you have a wonderful workshop this afternoon. Thank you for joining us live from Amsterdam and the Netherlands. So now we're going to move to our panel discussion, which will help us explore some of those issues that we touched on earlier, and also to explore where we go from here. So I'm delighted that joining me here on the panel, I have Anne Branch, who is Head of Unit for the European Commission at DG Employment. Please come and join me. I also have Elisa Mohamedou, Head of the OECD Centre for Skills, and I have Pascal Hess for the Institute for Employment Research. And I have a fourth panelist who is joining us virtually online, and that's Ljubica Nedeljkowska, who's a research scientist from the Complexity Science Hub. So welcome to all of you, and hi to Ljubica. So let's start, and my first question goes to you, Elisa, because we heard from from Claire, that countries around the world are starting to get to grips with this. But let's hear from your work from across the world. Can you just give us an overview of the changes that we're witnessing to the labour markets at an international level, and particularly what role upskilling and reskilling can play in this big context?
Thank you. And thank you, Claire, for this really thought-provoking discussion. I think, as Claire mentioned, and Manuela and Sophia before, we are indeed at a very crucial time for the workforce in the European Union. I think in addition to the trends that were spoken of in terms of AI, we also have the aging population. So most of the OECD countries will have a quarter of their population over 65 by 2050. That has an implication in terms of the skills that people will continue to have to develop over time, as well as the additional services in terms of personal and healthcare that are developed. So that's one thing. And then, of course, this high risk of automation. Our studies show that about 14% of jobs are at high risk of automation within the OECD, and 32% will have a significant change. So basically, we're really in a situation where, with these two trends, if you add on them the green transition, quite a lot of the industries are changing, and the workforce is also following that trend. What that means, of course, is that not only is there a need to look into the workforce that is coming, but if we look, for instance, at 2030, 80% of the people of the workforce are already in it. So that means really that we will have to upskill people in these situations. And doing that, we're talking about AI, we need to keep in mind the Digital Economy and Society Index showed that only about 54% of the population in the EU had basic digital skills. So we're talking about a revolution that is impacted by AI, but even green jobs are also technologically induced that doesn't have the basic skills. So there's quite a lot, I think, that needs to be done. And of course, the European Year of Skill is a wonderful element in that, because it is raising awareness about the needs around it. And it has implications on employment. The higher skilled you are, the more you can get a job, you can change jobs, you can retain that job, but also it has also implications on equality. If we're talking about gender or socially, economically disadvantaged groups. So it has an implication as well around those.
Thank you very much. So again, you're highlighting for us that change is coming, it's coming very fast, and we are an aging population, and that is changing the type of living environments, work environments, the types of tasks that are needed, and also that we have this enormous gap that about half of our populations in Europe don't have basic digital skills, let alone the advanced ones to help program. So you set out some quite major challenges. Anne, let me invite you to respond on this. What's the European Commission doing? What strategies are you putting in place to help address some of these big picture issues that Elisa has mentioned?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, we very much agree with Elisa's, the OECD's analysis of what are the challenges. But perhaps I'll just pick up on one before I talk about how we're trying to respond at the European Commission. And the first is the sheer pace of change, which you mentioned. And it really is phenomenal. I was listening to something a few days ago, which was just recalling that a long time ago now, but a couple of centuries ago, same generations used to work with the same technology for 2 or 3 generations. Now, those days are long gone since a while, but still technology wasn't changing quite as fast as it is today. So I'd say in the last few decades, this is a bit of a caricature, perhaps it's not entirely accurate, but still most people, if you went to university, weren't necessarily affected by a job change. It was more, if you got unlucky, were in the wrong industry. Whereas I think we're now in a reality where upskilling and reskilling has to be a reality for everyone. No one's job is entirely safe. And this really requires a change of mindset, as Manuela said, which is what we want with EU policy, what we want with the European Year of Skills. Now, we also the change is incredibly fast, but our responses also need to be incredibly fast. And so this is a real challenge. So we need agility. And the only way to do this is to work in partnership. So the solutions are shared responsibilities because no one actor can deliver the responses alone. So for example, education systems, the change is way too fast just to expect education systems to provide the solution. And as you mentioned, most of the people in our current workforce for the next 30 odd years are already in the workforce. So these people need to be upskilled and reskilled. So for this, we need to work in partnership with, there need to be public-private partnerships. There need to be partnerships with, the trade unions need to be involved. Individuals need to also take responsibility for their kind of lifelong learning trajectories. So there's a shared responsibility, and also between the EU, national and local levels. So taking that as a kind of a starting point, I'd just highlight a couple of our responses at the EU level. I mean, Manuela mentioned some of them, and I could talk for a long time, but perhaps picking up on this issue of public-private partnerships. The Pact for Skills was already mentioned, and closer, sorry. And this was launched in 2020, and it's been very successful with 1,500 businesses involved. And this is a really big movement to try to get business and different stakeholders, companies, public authorities to work together to address the skills shortages they face in their sectors. And 18 so-called large-scale partnerships have been set up now in all the industrial ecosystems that we've identified in the EU's industrial strategy. And here it's really to try to take responsibility jointly for trying to develop the skills that are needed in these industrial ecosystems. There are also initiatives like the Centres of Vocational Excellence or the European Alliance for Apprenticeships, where again, these are partnerships, public-private partnerships, where the Centres of Vocational Excellence are trying to really respond to the fact that vocational education is key to many of the green and digital jobs of the future, that we need excellence in this, and that we need to pool resources between public and private sectors, and also working across countries. And then the European Alliance for Apprenticeships, similarly, it's trying to mobilize businesses to create more apprenticeships places, because we know this kind of work-based learning is very powerful, both in terms of effective training and in terms of getting people into new career pathways. So these are just 3 examples of these kind of public-private partnerships, and where we also seek to make connections at the European level. And then perhaps the other policy initiative I would highlight, which is these are part of our general European skills strategy, but is again the individual learning accounts, which Manuela referred to. So this was the thinking on this actually goes back a while. It was already in response to the pre-chat GPT type, generative AI type AI, where it was already becoming obvious that potentially any routine jobs could be replaced in time. And again, that this meant a mind shift in systems to support individuals, and that individuals needed to find effective ways to navigate their own careers and retrain and upskill and reskill along the way. And so here the idea is really to focus on the individual, to empower them to also undertake training to adapt to new careers and learn new skills, by setting up savings accounts that they can tap into and which can help take away some of the barriers to training, which are typically motivation, time and money. Now, these are very much, we're trying to promote these among member states, and almost half are working on some kind of system, but this would be incredibly powerful and a very good response at the level of individuals. I could say more, but perhaps I'll stop here for the time being.
Thank you very much, Anne. Pascal, let me bring you in. You're someone who's very active in the research environment. Now, we've been talking about skills for about 30 years. I personally have been discussing this at European level for at least 10. So what's new? How is the conversation changing in the current environment?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. So I want to add on this accelerating technological change, because I think this is the key point also in the discussion about skills, because technological change basically replaces tasks that we did. They are now performed by machines, and this also kinds of leads us to more division of labor. And this is what we see in the last 30 years. For example, there are two more or less macro developments that we see. The first one is that we have a very much increase in the importance of social skills. This is because since we're getting more and more specialized in what we do, we need someone who communicates all these things between the specialists, right? So if you think about a team that works on something, that works on one output, you have two specialists that create something in that output, but if they cannot really communicate, the output won't be produced. So you need someone who organizes, who communicates, or you need the specialists also to have these skills. So the social skills are very important. The second thing is that because of this technological change, and as we heard before, educational systems have a hard time to adapt to these to this accelerating technological change. A lot of firms also kind of they are going away from these classroom trainings, going more into small team trainings. They create their own apps. They create their own kind of facilities at work. It's going to be more organically at the workplace. And the further training is, well, it's not that you get a certificate at the end and then you have the skills. That's how we thought about, I would say 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Now it's more you acquired the skill on the job. And I think that's the two developments. So the importance of social skills because of the specialization, and the adaptation of the employers by creating a more organic and incremental way of learning.
Thanks, Pascal. But before we pass on, when we had a preliminary chat, you gave us some really great concrete examples of that. Can you help us understand, this sort of adaptation of the workplace learning and also social skills? Have you got some concrete examples that help us understand that?
Yeah, sure. So the one example was that a big German company that I don't want to name here, so they're having an assembly line, and next to the assembly line they have kind of a practice room or a practice module where if the assembly line is at halt, they can practice some specific kind of techniques on how to be even more effective and efficient in the production process. And the other example was, for example, some retailers in Germany that have a very fluctuating set of things that they want to sell. What they do is they have something like an app, which I already mentioned. They have an app where the workers learn, like right before the new set of products will be sold. They will learn about the products, they will learn about special offers, and this is part of the work. So it's more organically implemented into the working time. It's not seen as, okay, today I'm working, tomorrow I'll be at a class, and the day after I'll be working again. It's more like it's part of the work, and you take half an hour, you take 20 minutes, 10 minutes to practice, to learn something new. And that's why skills are created more on the job than off the job now.
Thank you, Pascal. Again, that's really helpful to us to understand, what we mean by this. And so skills being broken down into sort of micro skills and smaller, more digestible processes that people can build into their everyday environment at work or beyond. Let me now bring in Ljubica, because I know that you're about to publish, it's quite exciting, the results of 14 years of research. And particularly you've been looking at, what happens when people get pushed out of their jobs involuntarily. A plant closes down, an industry disappears from a town. Who are the most affected by that skills mismatch? So we're very excited to hear the results of your research. Ljubica, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Tasmin, thank you for the kind introduction. Pascal's remarks could not have been a better segue to what I'm about to say, because this research was conducted with data from EPALE. So they have the best data on Germany. And I should mention what I'm reporting here was done jointly with Frank Nefke, who is also at the Complexity Science Hub in Vienna, and with Simon Wiederholt, who is at the Institute for Economic Research in Halle in Germany. So our objective was to study the impact of career switching, and with that skill mismatch on the long-term outcomes, career outcomes, and long-term earnings, kind of like a very good summary of what happens to your career. So we looked specifically at what happens when you upskill or downskill or reskill or stay in the same occupation. And we use data for 4 decades for Germany. So between we covered the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. And we studied all economic sectors in Germany. So it's a very generalizable study, as long as Germany is generalizable in the European context. And we looked specifically, as Tasmin, you said, at workers that lost their job due to plant closures, due to establishment closures. So these are not workers that were laid off because they didn't perform well, or they're not workers that got promoted to a new occupation because they did very well, they were very ambitious. But this is kind of your average worker that's kind of being unlucky because of some kind of large-scale technological change, structural change. In this period, for instance, just to visualize this, we have plants like Nokia closing in Germany because of technological change. So this is very fitting to the discussion we're having about the disruptive nature of technological change. Now, what happens, what we find is that I want to summarize it like in 4 points. First, these establishment closures themselves are very disruptive and are a main cause of skill mismatch and of occupational change. So to give you a sense of the magnitude, a worker who is displaced from their job in the course of these plant closures is 11 times more likely to change an occupation than statistically very similar worker. So a worker that has the same education, age, occupation, region, gender, even like the same income trajectory until then. So they're very similar. We compare very similar people to kind of be able to say something about cause and effect. The other thing, so we can kind of conclude that not just like the usual product cycle and the industry life cycle, but also these technological changes have a very large impact on switching careers. And then within those that are displaced, we're asking, what is the best strategy? If you can choose, what should you choose in terms of career choices? And it turns out that what pays most off is to stay in the same occupation. So if you're displaced and you stay in the same occupation, you lose about 9% annually of the pre-displacement earnings. So you earn on average 9% less in real terms in the next 15 years. So it's a large drop. You do that as well if you upskill. However, you also have to bury the time that it takes to upskill. And in our sample, on average, people take 1.5 years of retraining. Of course, you're losing income in that time. And if the upskilling costs something, then you have that investment. And nevertheless, even though you upskill, you don't manage to get to, to kind of compensate for the losses that occupational stayers do not experience. So occupational stayers are better off than upskillers. The worst faring category are those of the downskill, and about 1/3 of the sample downskill. So this is very common outcome. And this is very relevant to think in terms of people that are geographically not mobile. So if you think this decision is between sometimes the decision is between staying in your same town or the region and taking a job where you're downskilled, or you move away so that you can remain in your occupation or be able to upskill. And many people don't have that choice. Many people have to stay in the same region and take a worse a job that doesn't make use much of their human capital. Let me stop there. There are some very interesting other results, but I'm going to stop here so that I'll let Tasmin choose what she finds most interesting in what I said so far. So over to you, Tasmin, and thank you very much.
Well, there was a lot to process there, and thank you for sharing that. So I think the lesson from this is, first of all, don't lose your job. Secondly, if you do, try to stay in the same occupation and profession. But even those who upskill will lose 9% in real terms of their salary. That's quite shocking. But that it takes, and that effect can be seen over 15 years, that it takes time to reskill. So what you're giving us are really big red warning signs, given the scale and speed of change that is coming to our workplace. So Pascal, can I just invite you to just comment on that? This is new research that we've just heard of, but does that match what you've also found in your research, that there is a real price to be paid when there is a skills match? And if people downskill because they need to take another job, then there's a big impact on their career prospects.
So first of all, so the research that she presented is in line with what I've heard from other researchers as well, that there are a lot of people who really lose up to, like, on average 90% of their income. So to repeat the question, sorry, can you repeat the question again?
I was just saying that this, we've got some big changes coming to our labour market. So the chances of people being made involuntarily unemployed because a sector changes, closes, etc., that's more likely to happen, I think, than it did in the past because of the changes of our environment. So this sets up a huge challenge for how we position skills, because we tend to assume that skills will help you get a better job and you'll get better life prospects. And the research is saying that's not necessarily the case. Is that correct?
So I would say it depends, but in general, that is correct. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm going to invite you to come in on this, because these big trends that we've heard about, and some of the challenges and barriers to retraining, how you described earlier a whole range of different options, possibilities. Governments are really trying to put a range of measures in place, and yet we've got these very stark figures. Now, admittedly, that's looking backwards over the last 40 years, and some of them, previous shocks may have been before we had these policies in place. But how much capacity do we have to be able to deliver a skills response to these challenges?
I mean, those are very sobering findings and rather pessimistic findings, and so we really need to take them seriously. On the other hand, history isn't necessarily linear, and as you say, we can also shape the future. I'm an optimist, that's why I'm a policymaker, because if you're a policymaker, you want to make things better. But I think what it does highlight is the urgency of a lot of the things we're looking at and trying to put in place and encourage member states to do, including that now systems need to adapt fast. So what I would say here is don't wait. People need to anticipate when they're still in a job, is that job going to be around? And they should be supported in doing that. Now, the idea behind the individual learning accounts is largely this, so that it's not just retraining shouldn't just be something that you do once you're unemployed, because once you're unemployed, it's incredibly scarring. Your dignity takes a hit. It's incredibly tough in many respects psychologically. So we need to change our mindset where people try to realize my job might not be safe. Perhaps I should start anticipating learning new skills, learning new things. But again, the national systems should support these individuals in doing that whilst they're still in work. And they should also know where to go to get guidance. Now, one of the topics that's emerging very much in the discussions on the European Year of Skills is this issue of better skills intelligence, where we have better IT tools, which some of the EU agencies are working on. So we're getting to a situation where we can have better skills intelligence around where different occupations and jobs where there's demand, but then also steering people to those jobs, knowing where to go. So not just if you're unemployed, but knowing where you can go for careers guidance when you're still in work, and ideas about how to transition. I'd say there's another thing that's emerging very much since COVID and the big shift to digital. And again, this is a topic that's emerging a lot during the European Year of Skills, which is this idea of skills first approaches, where a lot of employers now are looking at, actually some through need, are realizing they can't just look at people's qualifications. They're still important, but that people have a lot more to offer if you untap their skills. And where I'm going with this is to say that these people who are unfortunately not finding work of equivalent value, if we could, there are evolving schemes to assess people's skills and to validate their experience, so that someone who's working in an industry which is carbon intensive and that industry might be transitioning into something greener, or they need to go and work in another sector which isn't at threat, that there may be things among their skill set which are still relevant to those new jobs. So we need to, by working on new ways to assess people's skills and to validate them, they would be able to sell themselves better in other jobs. So it's not just so that they're not just on a path to something much lower paid and unfortunate. So, I mean, this is a big subject, but those are just a couple of pointers.
Thank you. Elise, if I could invite you to pick up on this, and we're talking to a community of adult educators and the vet community. Can you give us a sense of how that fits into the evolution of increasing personalized, tailored training and support, and the complexity of developing something and offering for skills and training that is individualized rather than, here's a group of classes that we offer, please take them.
So just to come back, I think on some of the points that were made as well. So I think the disruption of jobs is something that is very clear, and I think the regional disparities is something to really highlight. At the same time, we are in a transition that will create a lot of new jobs. The ILO estimates that in only the European Union, about 500,000 jobs will be created through the green transition. And if you look at, there's a study that showed that about 60% of the jobs that we have today did not exist in the 1940s. So jobs are created as well. So I think it's important to also send that message that it's not just about job destruction, but there's also job creation. And the question then is about who fills these jobs. And I fully agree with Anne, is that it's not just, I think this call of you need new skills, you need to upskill and reskill can be slightly overwhelming because people do have a lot of these skills. I think it's a lot of those that they acquire, as Pascal said, in the workplace, but also outside. I think non-formal, informal learning is extremely important. And that's where also this whole issue of also hiring based on skills rather than academic qualifications, being a little bit more innovative as well in assessing those skills and recognizing the prior learning that one may have acquired through specific experience is important. And so to go back to your question, I think you mentioned, I think it was much easier before in the traditional education systems where you had sort of the instruction time was a very clear measure of the learning. This is quite different now because we're calling for much more personalized, and we're looking into assessing more the outcomes, the relevance, the flexibility, all of these social skills that you were mentioning and beyond, because we may not need, for instance, as Claire was mentioning, coders, but we will certainly need prompt engineers. So we may not teach people necessarily to code, but we need to teach them to ask the right questions. That's something that you use in your personal life. That's something that you use in the school environment, in the teaching environment, the learning environment, and in your personal life. And so I think that's where, for instance, at the OECD, what we're trying to do, because I also agree with what Manuela said, that most of these new jobs will be coming from vocational education and training, just because of the proximity of that learning to the workplace and the adaptability of it, the flexibility of it, being very close to the demand of employers, being able to adapt to that. And so what we're trying to do is to set up what we call the PISA vet, which is sort of, for some of you who are familiar with the PISA, this is the assessment of 15-year-old in school environment. We're trying to do something similar, an international assessment of those vocational education and training for both young and adults, because if we are going to also ask not only persons, but also sort of the employers to take these to take these skills, we need to also be able to assess those in a different context. So it's not just the learning, it's going to be as well very much about practice-oriented skills as well as employability skills, and in a real context. That's what we're trying to do. So I do think that we are advancing. We have to also advance in the assessment processes if we're going to, calling for this upskilling and reskilling, so that it also reflects the reality of the new learning environment.
Thank you. And in this last sort of 10-minute block of our conversation, I'd like us to address something that came through in a question on the social media about how we address inequalities. We live in an unequal world. Obviously, the impact of technology change is falling unequally. And Ljubica, I'm going to come to you first to sort of help us to understand what should we be keeping an eye on to make sure that the inequalities that we have don't grow through some of these changes. Over to you.
Thank you, Tasmin. So one of the inequalities I think that's much of interest here is the learning inequality. And I very much am in favor of this idea and project of individual learning accounts. What we have observed with Glenda Quintini from OECD in another study is that the workers that are most likely to be adversely affected by technological change are the ones that receive least training on the job. They're also not acquiring much training outside the job, at least based on self-reported data. If this is true, and we have no reason to believe that it's not, then leveling the playing field through these individual learning accounts may be a way to go. So we have also seen this in other contexts, that people that are kind of on the bottom of the occupational ladder, they neither receive much training at work, nor they have much time or bandwidth to do it outside work. So I think some kind of combination of the accounts with incentives to acquire skills would be good. Otherwise, we're only seeing growing inequality over time at the job. So someone who has relatively small gap in skills in the beginning, work experience makes this gap larger by the fact that that the jobs that are less automatable get more training, and jobs that are more automatable, people in jobs that are more automatable get less training. These incentives are not the incentives for firms to train people that they will automate are non-existent. Another thing that I think could help with inequality is helping people move easily geographically. In these cases where you have plant closures, especially large plant closures, what often happens is that whole communities disintegrate. So it's not just that the factory closes, but the daycare center that served the workers closes. The shops that provided food for the factory workers close. The shopping mall closes. So a whole community may disintegrate. And if it's very difficult for you to move geographically, then you're going to suffer very large losses. So I'm very much in favor of subsidies for geographic movement. And lastly, Tasmin and I had a chat about what do you do about inequalities within the workplace. And this is more of anecdotal evidence, but I kind of hold a strong belief here that and this depends on country by country. Yeah, you have countries like I was for a long time in the US, and over there it is not practiced to disclose what you earn. And these kinds of practices are, I think, supercharging inequalities, because ultimately people get what they negotiate for, and different people have different negotiation skills and value their work differently. So you end up with very different pay for the same kind of work. So I would here argue for within workplace pay equality. I would argue for salary transparency of bonuses, of salaries, and so on, so that people at least have a fair chance to compare work effort and compare what that work effort is being remunerated. Thank you. And over to you, Tasmin.
Thank you. Pascal, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but let me invite you to add on this. We've heard that the people who often have the lowest power in the workplace are often the people who are given least access to training, either within the workplace or elsewhere. So what should we be doing about that?
So first of all, I would second the point that people who are most vulnerable in terms of being replaced by technologies are the ones that are provided training the least. And I think this has something to do with some kind of classical market failure. Because if you think about employers, what they have in mind is to maximize their profit, or to make profit at least. I think that's a point that everyone agrees upon. And so they kind of invest in workers where they think that training will enhance productivity. If they don't think that training will enhance productivity for certain kind of workers, or if they think about replacing them anyway, they will not invest in training because that's costly. It will reduce profit. So on the other hand, there is the individual who has kind of, that's disputable, but they have the knowledge that probably they will be replaced by technologies in the future. But still, then they don't invest in further training. And this is what we see in our research, that they are not investing in formal degrees. They are not investing in non-formal training. They are also less likely to be part of informal trainings, however they look like. And this is where public policy should step in and give incentives to, I think, individual learning accounts were mentioned already, are a good idea. But also public policy has to make the point to these workers, to the people, that further training is beneficial to them. And we're setting up a kind of an experiment where we try to influence the expectations about benefits and costs of further training. And then we can see, okay, does it really matter to inform them, to alter their beliefs about the returns to further training? And then we can talk about more public policy, but I think individual learning accounts is a good first step towards this.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I apologize, we have run out of time. We had so much more that we could explore in this, but I want to say a warm thank you to the members of our panel. We started with a deep dive from Claire, looking at technology, what's coming, and how governments are responding. And in this panel, we looked a little bit about how skills, whether it's upskilling or it's retraining, it's dealing with skills mismatch, is a public policy response to some of the challenges that we heard that are coming in. And Pascal and Ljubica, you highlighted how they can be used to redress some of the imbalances that we find in the environment. It was really helpful to hear the range of things that are being offered, and I know we're going to explore them in the next 2 days. So can I say a warm thank you on your behalf to Anne, to Elisa, to Pascal, and to Ljubica. Thank you very much to our panelists. So what a great start to our EPALE Community Conference. I promised that we had 3 days of reflection, conversation, and inspiration, and I hope today sparks off lots of conversation in the national workshops that are going to take place. There's one happening immediately after I close this plenary, and in other countries. We hope we've given you some food for thought, because the position and role of the vet community in helping people to build resilience for the changes that are coming is absolutely clear. The legislation framework is coming, the public policy mechanisms are there, but we're passing the baton over to you, this adult educational and learning community, to see how you can build and take it forward. So I'd like to say a warm thank you to those of you who participated online, and particularly those who sent questions. We really appreciated that. That helped shape our conversation. And a reminder of the hashtags we'd like you to use. That's Bloom with EPALE and European Year of Skills. Thank you very much, and goodbye from Brussels and our opening plenary.